numbers, size, show. And so we gravitate towards whatever is really visible, whatever is very big, whatever is very shiny. And a lot of these alternative expressions of church are very small. They're scattered all over the place, as we've been talking about, like scattered seeds everywhere. They are birthed, they die. Sometimes they last a year, sometimes they last 10 years, they move on. And so it's really difficult when we try and put usual metrics on something like that. And in Churchland, we know what the metrics are. We know that it's bums on seats, tithing, money, baptisms, conversions perhaps, all that kind of language. And so when it comes to fresh expressions or alternative ways of doing church, we have to think about, what are we doing, first of all, a really basic question, what do we want? And then how do we measure that and not use the usual metrics because they don't work with something like this.
Welcome back to another episode of Filthy Hope. If it's your first time here, welcome. As always, I'm your host, Pastor Jonty, and I'm joined by my co-host, Rev Ness.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm excited because we've got another Rev in the other chair, brother.
If people are watching, again, Ness and I are next to each other. When that happens, that's usually because we've got a guest.
Dun, dun.
Rev Dr Karina Kreminski, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Yes.
Yeah. How are you?
Good. I'm doing really well today.
Yeah, awesome. We're so glad you could join us.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Maybe just for our listeners who maybe don't know who you are, could you give us like the brief day in the life? Who is Karina? So they can maybe get to know you, and then we'll dig into some of your story.
Me, I am married to Armin Garkavian. I have a little cavoodle called Molly.
Beautiful.
She has a lot of sass, let me tell you. She's had a challenging 2 years. She's 2 years old. She's had a lot of issues. People keep asking us if she's a rescue puppy. She's not. She's actually living a little privileged life, but we love her dearly. And I spend most of my days in Surry Hills. I love the inner city. I love where we live. I've been living there for 9 years now. And I also have a role at Uniting Mission and Education as a missions catalyst.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm sure that all keeps you pretty busy across all those different things. Yeah.
You know what? I am busy, but I'm not. I don't want to be that kind of person that walks around saying, you know, when people ask you, how are you? And the first thing you say, I'm busy.
Oh, I'm so busy. Yeah.
I don't want to do that. And I don't feel like I'm doing that. And that was my life goal by the age of 50, that I wouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
And so I think I've leveled out. I've got a lot to do, but I don't feel hectic busy. I feel okay.
Great. Yeah.
Gee, that's nice. That's something you could teach us all a little bit more about, I reckon, Karina.
I'm learning.
Don't you think?
Yeah. I love, like, it's that balance of like busy where you're excited and you've always got stuff to do, but there's a balance where if it goes too far, you end up burning
and
out. So
busy and energised, but not busy and burnt out.
that's right.
Yeah. It's a thing, isn't it? Yeah.
And it's that learning how to say no, isn't it? Like a few opportunities that come our way in terms of speaking or, you know, travelling to do various gigs and that kind of thing, and just saying no and being comfortable with that and saying that it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still haven't learnt that bit, but you've been a Rev a lot longer than I have. At what point in your reverendom do you actually learn that it's okay to say no, Karina?
It's a unit that you do in your
Is
AQ.
That's right. It should be a whole unit.
When am I going to learn that no thing? Because I really need to bloody learn it fast.
You got to shift from FOMO to JOMO, right?
Yeah, right.
That's it.
Yeah.
I love that.
The joy of missing out and just staying at home. Isn't there a podcast or a book about doing nothing or something? Like just, I think it's a book or a podcast where I think it's called Nothing Happens. A friend put me onto it the other day, and it's bedtime stories where nothing happens.
Yeah, that's great. I'll look into that. That actually sounds really good.
I take medication so I can feel that. Yeah, it's excellent. I wish it was organic though, and it just was a nothing thing that happened. There's something beautiful in nothingness, and there's a serenity and a peace and stillness, isn't it, that you can find when you actually allow yourself to enter that space.
Yeah. And I think there's a bit more for me self-control, as in I don't feel, sometimes for me when there's too much going on I feel out of control. But that sense of saying no, not now, and being still. It's like, I actually feel in control of who I am. And I kind of like that feeling.
Yeah, it's a very powerful feeling. I used to describe when I was early on in my ministry journey that people like you, Karina, because I can see in you this very thing that I'm going to describe. I would say to Rev Dr Peter Davis, Uniting Church minister, I'd say, Peter, when am I going to get the injection? And he'd say, Nurse, you're very conservative. Nurse, what injection do you mean? This is before Corona. And I'd say, that buddy peaceful thing that you've got going on that just oozes out of your body. You're just like calm and peaceful. That thing, that minister thing. When am I going to get the injection, mate? And he said, it will come in time. I want the injection, Karina. You've got this. You just ooze the injection of peace and calm and serenity throughout you. And it's kind of nice to be in your space because it makes me feel calm.
Oh, thank you. That's actually really nice to hear because it's something that I worked on, really. It didn't just come naturally. I think, for me, as I got older, I just realised my body couldn't do certain things anymore. And I've recently had some health issues, nothing major, but I've never had health issues. And recently things have come up and you think, that's because of stress. Yeah. That's because of anxiety. That's because I just had way too much on and I could feel it in my body and I wasn't listening. Yeah. And when you're younger, particularly as a female, there are so many opportunities and you've got to get ahead and you've got to prove yourself as well. So I don't want to be too judgmental of women in their 30s and 40s who are just trying so hard to get a place, because I was like that. Yeah. So I get it. You have to push yourself to be seen. It's unfortunate, but that's how we're living. And so now I'm 50 and I'm like, it's okay, I don't need to do that anymore. And so I kind of regret pushing myself, but at the same time, you kind of had to do it to be seen.
It's interesting, and I fully agree with that. That's the thing. I think I learned how to be still and to know that God was there and present when I had a big medical episode when I was 48. And I think I learnt very quickly how I needed to. I had to stop because otherwise I was going to die. So I had to stop. I had no choice. Wasn't it something that I could try on? I just had to be it instantly one day, and had to be still on my back for 3 months while my heart healed. And I learnt stillness for the first time in my life. And I thought, maybe now I'll have the injection. Maybe now this is how God's teaching me how to be. I'll just be peaceful and calm, because it was probably the most peaceful and calm I'd ever been, and so reliant on God for my next breath, for my entire life, for my cellular healing at a deep cardiovascular level. And it was a very precious time, almost one of those times, is it James that says, consider it pure joy when we're going through shitty situations. Is that right, Reverend Doctor?
I'm pretty sure shitty's in there, yeah.
Shitty's in there. Yeah. Well, that's just a Bible according to Ness. That whole idea of just learning to trust God and to feel that peace. And it's a peace that passes all understanding, isn't it? And sister, you ooze that.
Oh, thank you.
So, thanks for coming so we can get a bit of you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's nice.
That probably transitions really nicely into something that you said to us beforehand, that you're super interested in this idea of biomimicry, which is the first time I'd seen that as a selection of letters in that order. So maybe talk to us about what that is.
Say it again though, Jonty.
Biomimicry.
Are you going to put it on the screen?
Sure.
Yeah.
Ness loves giving me more post-production work to do.
Can you do some plant and then human life and some fabulous...
Jonty, I know you're editing this now. Don't give in. You don't have to do more work.
Nice.
So biomimicry, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's something that I learned about just recently, actually, but it's just given a word for something that I've been trying to do for probably about 5 years now, and that is just to learn from nature. That's really all it is. Watch nature and learn from it and apply it to what you do. So, you can apply it to organisations. You can apply it to the way we do church. You can apply it to the way that you live your life. You can apply it to your profession as an accountant. Look at nature and see the way that it is, and then whatever principles you can draw from that, apply it to your particular context. I don't know if you've read or heard of that book. Is it called The Hidden Life of Trees or The Secret Life of Trees?
I can't remember.
It's one of those. But, it was groundbreaking a couple of years ago because the author taught us that everything is connected and that trees communicate with one another and they send off signals to actually ward off attacks from insects. They connect with one another. They live in community. They grow fungus in the roots and because of that, they're able to actually talk to one another,
Wow.
quote unquote. And just some of those kinds of principles, I feel like we can learn from that. We can live more in tune with nature and more in touch with nature and practice some of that stillness that we're talking about and that connection to one another and learning that we can live better lives by living in community rather than by being isolated.
Yeah.
And thinking, in my work, we talk a lot about strategy. And while that's really helpful, at the same time, I was thinking about how, in a way, nature has its own strategy, but beyond that, it's more kind of, obviously it's organic, but it kind of just does what it wants. And sometimes it looks really chaotic and messy. And so sometimes I feel like when we apply that to our lives, we can then feel a little bit more comfortable if we've got chaos and mess going on in our lives, because in the midst of that, something is happening, something is growing, and it can be something really beautiful. And so we shouldn't fear the mess, we shouldn't fear the chaos, and we shouldn't maybe try and impose some kind of artificial strategy on that, but just let it go for a while and see what emerges from that. I'm not anti-strategy, but I just think that we can learn from letting go sometimes and seeing where we end up.
And trying how we busily want to fix stuff, don't we? There's a problem, we go, now we're going to fix it. We're so smart that we're going to fix this situation. So maybe just sitting and letting time heal a situation or... I think in my own life how just time heals. We say that, don't we? That's a bit of a thing. Time will heal. You'll get through it in time.
But how rarely do we actually
apply it?
Like I'm even just thinking about my own life and how, like, as late stage capitalism kind of accelerates, like everything, timelines just get squished faster and faster and faster and faster. And like, especially if we're looking at business or church or mission or all these things, and certainly my observation has been that the timelines at which we look for results just keep getting shorter and shorter. And like when things don't give us the results that we're after, the point at which we try and readjust and try something new is getting shorter and shorter. And I've only been working in the church for 6 years now, I think, like almost no time at all in the grand scheme of things. And that's already something that I've noticed, is that keeps getting shorter and shorter and shorter, which I imagine is in direct conflict to this idea of, like, even think of like the analogy of growing a plant where they grow up with a little stick to shape it into the way you want it to be, as opposed to just planting a seed and letting something grow. And there is an element of trimming and pruning required, but and I mean, what we do here is probably an example of that, of a seed that's just kind of grown without any real plan. We just kind of go with the flow. I definitely think there's something to that in not trying to set our expectations too firm and not jumping in so quick with this isn't working, let's try something else. Like giving stuff like space to breathe, I think is such a we don't do that very well, I don't think.
And giving space for things to die,
Yes.
which we don't like to talk about very much, do we? Because whenever we see something die, we try and pump life back into it. But maybe, as nature shows us, things have to die in order for new life to come. And, in our Christian tradition, we are a people of death and resurrection. And I see a lot of death deniers, people who only want to focus on the resurrection, but you can't have that without death. And so death is okay. It's all right. It will come back in another way. And so just being comfortable, I think, with that, rather than trying to prop things up, that it's okay to let them die, you know. And again, that doesn't mean failure. just means we can experiment more with other things.
I think you've hit on something beautiful there. We do think it's failure, don't we? Our humanness steps in and pollutes what could be just a beautiful natural part of God's process by imposing our thoughts of failure because we're so busy trying to be great that it does. I wonder if in biomimicry in the natural world, do trees think it's a failure when maybe branches fall off? Probably not. You know? That might be weight loss for them.
Yeah, that's right. Or they could be contributing to the soil in terms of compost and
here we go.
richness. And
Jeff, bust off your big branch, mate. That bit down there needs a little bit more nutrients. No, literally, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
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 That's good. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's like things dying is not just good and okay. It's like actually necessary. I can't remember the name of the preacher now. I'll say where it's from, and if people know, they'll remember. There's a clip from one of his sermons in a King's Kaleidoscope song about the axe being at the foot of the tree, and if the tree is rotten, then it's actually time to cut it down. And it being a metaphor about American culture at the time during the Civil Rights Movement, but it's a really great metaphor. Can't remember the name of the preacher now, it doesn't matter. But yeah, it's like if the tree is rotten and it's dead, and it's actually more dangerous to leave it up to fall on someone. Like it's time to cut it down.
Yeah.
And that's not only okay, but it's actually necessary to do that so that there's room for the next thing. Yeah. There's so many applications for that, I think, and especially when you put that lens over like mission and church life. So many applications for that. Yeah.
And we saw ourselves as when we first started this podcast, Jonty, as I remember us pitching it to church council, and the analogy we used was we were scattering seeds. And we were just going to throw seeds as far as we could, Karina, in the hope to see what happened, where germination would take place. And now we're in 26 countries around the world. People are listening to you today.
Yeah, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that was a seed chuckage, brother.
Yeah.
Seed chuckage.
So we're into biomimicry also, Karina. It's not
Without
just
realising,
you. It's not just you, Karina.
There's just so much being written about this. It's
It's
exciting.
so cool.
You can really read up on it, and there are most organisations are thinking about this now because we can't do long-term strategic plans anymore. For example, you've just got to keep adjusting bit by bit and
Pivot
constantly. Yeah.
Can you give us some examples of ways in which humanity can mimic nature so that we can be better at what we do?
Well, I think we've been talking a little bit about, and you touched on this, Ness, around failure. I think it's a terrible word, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think we need to think about that in a positive way.
Wow.
My Pilates instructor always says, lift weights until you get to failure,
I know.
which sounds awful and doesn't sound very motivating, but it actually is, because I have to get to that point where I just can't anymore. And I think we need to get comfortable and even create a culture where we can fail, because then what that does is it generates a risk-taking culture where people will try different things, and if they fail, it's okay, you move on and you just try it in another way or in another context or at a different time or with other people or whatever it might be. And I feel like nature's like that. It's just constantly evolving and moving and shifting, and it's organic, it's moving, it's not calcified. And once an institution gets calcified, it becomes inward looking, it becomes self-preserving, and that's true death, isn't it? That's nothing left for that there. And so one of my roles, and something that I love to do, is think about alternative expressions of faith communities. So how can we start up faith communities in this day and age where people are craving hope, craving love, craving some sort of meaning, and just try start something up and see where it goes, just the same way that you were talking about scattering seeds, and you would have never thought that this would eventuate the way it has. And so that's exciting, you know, and it's getting comfortable with that kind of way of being, and being comfortable with failure and being comfortable with risk-taking, which is difficult for institutions to do, but I don't think it's impossible. I think a system can be that way. I still have hope for systems.
Yeah, you've got to be brave, don't you? And you've got to be in church land. You've got to then harness the risk takers in a church council.
Yes.
To then pitch something risky to them that's going to cost them money, so big investment.
But investment, not just of money, often.
Like,
like there's huge
time
investment
and
of
all sorts of things. But to try something new that's way out of their paradigm of understanding how the internet actually works and how you could actually get traction for from something like this. I mean, we've had to learn new language ourselves, haven't we, in terms of what we need to do to populate our podcast into the world. It's a whole nother language, and older people don't know that language. They're not familiar with it, so they're brave when they go, go and have a crack at that. Go and scatter some seeds then. And I think that's just landing and arriving in a place of dependence on God, I think also. There's that piece, isn't there? And how then does nature depend then on God in biomimicry? Can you speak to that, Karina?
No.
Because I could have a crack and a guess.
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, I think nature definitely relies on things of creation like the sun and the rain for its nutrients, and it relies, I think, on humanity in our urban setting for us not to destroy it. It's relying and screaming, begging out to us to not pollute it. Do you know what I mean? I think maybe
absolutely. I mean, that's a huge thing today, isn't it? Thinking about climate and the environment, and I'm very passionate about that. I attend something called climate cafes, and that's where we come together and we talk about our climate distress, climate anxiety. So we don't meet to fix things. We just meet to talk about our distress.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's run by a group called Psychology for a Safe Climate. They're climate psychologists.
Love it.
And so, and a lot of people come to these, a lot of climate activists who are very exhausted, and younger people who are talking about extinction.
Yep.
And don't know which way to turn these days in terms of a future. It's very dystopian if they look at the future. And so I was trained just recently to run one of these, and we're going to run one at the Surry Hills Neighbourhood Centre.
Excellent.
Because I just think it's so important. And it actually is I can't describe it to you if you've never been to one, but if anybody can find one, I would encourage you to attend, because it is a very unique space to be with a bunch of people from all over the place, never met them before. Sometimes it's 5 people, sometimes it's 12, sometimes it's 20 on Zoom, though we will be doing this face-to-face in Surry Hills Neighbourhood Centre, but it's usually on Zoom, and we just share how we're feeling, and it's so disarming. It's such a beautiful space. It's a meditative space, it's a gentle space, and it's a very caring space for one another, looking after our emotions and our feelings and our distress about the future. And it's actually not a hopeless feeling that you come out of that space with. You actually end up feeling very hopeful about humanity after coming out of a climate cafe.
Wow.
It's beautiful.
Is it because is it that camaraderie that you get in an AA meeting?
I wonder.
Is it like, I don't know if you've ever been to an AA meeting, but
I haven't, so I don't know, but it's a meditative space, and it is a space where you see every time I've been to one, I see the beauty of humanity. And somebody said the other day in a climate cafe that this space has made me have hope again in humanity.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, yeah, it does.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'd be really interested to, hear more about that and maybe go along to one, because I definitely probably identify with that group of people that look at the future and go, how do you even begin to feel hopeful about I'm at the age where I'm starting to have conversations about children.
Yeah.
And it's pretty common for people my age that I'm close with to basically say, why would I bring a child into this world when who knows what the climate's going to be in the next 10, let alone 50 years.
Yeah.
So the idea of where hope comes into that is really, it isn't a theoretical for me. It's actually a really practical, necessary thing that, I'm going to have to wrestle with more and more as I get older, because it becomes more and more present and more vital to actually getting up in the morning and interfacing with the world. So I'm going to put a pin in that for me and come back to that at some point, because that's really interesting for me.
Both my daughters worry deeply about it, and they're getting close to child rearing age also, and they do talk about it, particularly my younger one who's 24. She just says, Mum, I'm worried, deep, like it's an anxiousness about her and the world, and why aren't we doing something about this? Mum, why not?
We had somebody at the cafe share that they were concerned about having children, and she was wrestling with that, and then on the other hand saying, but it's also a sign of ultimate hope, bringing a child into the world. It's like subversive almost to do that. So she was sort of wavering between the two thoughts. It's a safe space to share that kind of thing and be honest and real about it, when in society we're just getting on with life, aren't we? We're just busy, and we hear about climate change and we want to get involved, but we're not sure how, and then we just get on with it. But this is a space to stop and go, no, this is real. I want to get in touch with what I'm feeling. And then from that, you can do something about it. One thing that I was thinking about a lot is there are so many people involved in climate activism, which is so important. It's so important. But sometimes that can get very abstract. You turn up to a rally, or you sign a petition, or you send a letter to Parliament, that kind of thing. One thing I've been working on is just connecting with nature, the particular, focusing on the particular, not the abstract. One thing that has changed my life is getting a dog. There are many people out there who have dogs. This is the first time I've had a dog, and just noticing this creature, taking care of this one creature rather than signing a petition about how we need to help all dogs, which is good to do, but just taking care of this one creature has just taught me so much about nature. Same thing as taking care of a pot plant, right? I was reading a book recently called Church of the Wild. Now that is a good book. Very interesting around biomimicry. How does the church become wild? How is the church rewilded? And she talks there about this, that her son got very exhausted being a climate activist, and the way that he got his soul back was by connecting with a deer in the woods. This deer that kept coming over, and he kept feeding it and connecting with it and watching it, and just this one deer. So
I watch Molly. I have watched Molly on social media, because you got Molly when we got Mouse.
Oh.
And she's a little crazy cavoodle also that costs too much money. But watching her do the world is a most interesting thing, isn't it?
It really is.
And how they communicate with us and how hot-wired they are and anxious that they are. And, I fully agree with you on that. I've had time to stop and watch Mouse and engage with her in a very deep, loving way, like I'm like her grandma, and it's quite life-giving. I love that little thing. It's squirreled its little soul into my guts. It really has. I didn't want another bloody animal in the house. It's a divine part of God's creation. It's precious.
And I think I was listening to, is it Ricky Gervais?
Yes.
He has a social media, I think it's Instagram, and he was saying about how he just loves dogs. And for him, spirituality is all about dogs.
Oh, wow.
Like he has to pat a few dogs every day in order to get his, connect with his soul.
Wow.
He actually said, this is spirituality for me.
Oh, I love that.
I thought, wow.
Yeah. God's in that.
Yeah.
God's in everything, right?
God is in that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's it, the particular, right? And listening for that. How do we find the sacred in people's conversations instead of looking at Ricky Gervais and going, what's he talking about? What is actually being curious rather than judgmental, being curious and going, he finds the spirit through his connection with dogs. Where is God in that? How fascinating. You know, I love that. I love asking that question. Barbara Brown Taylor talks about finding the sacred, and I like that word, finding the sacred.
I do
Because
too.
people these days, well, a lot of people can be uncomfortable with the transcendent and the sacred. At least the people that I connect with in Surry Hills can be very sceptical about the other, whether we name it as God, the universe, the transcendent.
Higher being.
Very tricky.
I recently finished a subject on, we used two theologians, Moltmann and Paniker, and it was one of the first lectures, and Sathi, the lecturer, was telling us all about and you can find the sacred in everything. I want you to journal on your next day out into the world about the sacred. I'm going, bullshit. I'm literally thinking that. I'm going, yawn. I've got a power walk down to the beach tomorrow with Mouse on its thing at 5:30 in the morning, and I'm on a mission. I don't have time for freaking sacred. What is he crapping on about? And I had to write this journal thing about the sacred. So I went, kill two birds with one stone. I'll power walk like a demon with the dog, and I'll hunt the sacred if it's there. I'm probably not going to find this crap. There won't be any. There's no sacred. So, I feel like such a loser. I got a distinction. Anyway, cruising along because I prayed. I prayed, and voila, God does God, and I opened my eyes to things that I see every single morning that I don't really see, that I see out there, like I'm looking at your glasses, but I had never looked at your glasses. So I wrote about, I remember walking along Newport Beach. I live in a beautiful sacred part of the world, which has just got divine everywhere. So now I believe. And I noticed these leaves on the Norfolk pines that I walked under. There's a row of Norfolk pines at Newport Beach, and I walk under them every day that I go for a walk. There I have Mouse on its lead, and Mousie's just doing Mousey, cruising along, and I look up. All of a sudden I start seeing the prongs of each individual piece of tree, and I have this deep, it was like I'd had a joint. I've never had a joint, but I'm thinking it might be what it's like when you're stoned. But I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, it was a beautiful sense of God in that. And then it opened up and I looked further out, and of course I looked at the horizon and I had the ocean there, and that was easy to find the sacred in that because it was water. But to find it in I focused in on the tiniest little prongy bits of the prongs on the bit, and I found the sacred in that. I felt like I was losing my brain, Jonty, and then I thought, I wonder if he said it's in everything. Oh, bullshit, it's not. Okay, so I found it there. That'll be enough to write about. It won't be. And then I hear zoom, zoom down Barrenjoey Road. Down comes cars. I think, there's not going to be, that's so not sacred. And then I go, God's doing a number on me, and I go, there's a person in the car. And there's a person probably talking to their mother in the car. And they're having a beautiful connected conversation. And they're gifted, and they're breathing air, and there's blood pumping. I had this moment. It was just magnificent, actually. I became fully present with the sacred on a walk that I do most days of the week that I had never connected like that before, because I was so busy doing exercise. Get my heart rate up. Move, Mousey, let's go. Come on, let's walk faster, get the steps done quick. How am I going? Got to get to the light. Quick, let's go, the next thing. But I stopped. I had a Karina injection and I felt peace and calm and connected with a world like I hadn't done before.
That's beautiful.
It was really cool, Karina.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
And it all started with paying attention, didn't it? Which is what all the spiritual gurus of the past have always said. And even the writer Annie Dillard, talks about, her books, she writes so meticulously about everything that she notices in nature, the way you were describing this. And I think that's why she was able to encounter the sacred. But paying attention is the first step, isn't it?
Yeah. My focus became like hyper-focus. I don't know if that's a thing. But it's like I focused like I drilled in to this prong. And I'm looking at it. All the little segments? Have you ever looked deeply at one of those things? It's segmented together, and how God has placed these pieces and layer, like parquetry almost over the top of each other to make the beautiful prong. It was quite overwhelming.
Yeah. I saw a film this year called Perfect Days. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's a Japanese film about a Japanese toilet maintenance plumber dude, toilet cleaner.
Wow.
And there's almost no plot to the movie. It's basically the routine of him waking up, buying the same can of Boss coffee from the same vending machine, getting in the same van, going to the same public toilets, doing the same routine of just cleaning. And it's exactly the same thing about finding the sacred in the everyday, but it's actually, it goes so far as to be about finding the sacred in what often is considered like profane and not sacred.
Yeah.
Wow.
In finding joy and life and connection, and having a fulfilling life full of all of those things, despite living a life that the characters and people around him like don't even acknowledge him or look at him because he's just walking around cleaning the toilets. And there's no great that there is a slight, like the tiniest of revelations in terms of plot and who this guy is and the connection with one of the people, but it almost doesn't matter. It's just him noticing things.
Cool.
Day to day. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Karina, in the Uniting Church, you are the mission formation babe.
Is that on the plaque on the door?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where she got it from, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's gold.
Yeah. So what is
We're very relaxed in the UCA.
Yeah, that is actually true. So what is the actual title, just for
It's
people?
a missions catalyst.
Missions catalyst.
And my
the
focus
100
is fresh expressions and missional formation.
There we go.
Yeah,
I could have never got that
I
out.
like the first one.
Yeah, I think my title's much better. Karina, do you, in fresh expressions, it's a term that I've been hearing about for a very long time in the Uniting Church. It almost doesn't sound fresh because I've been hearing it for a very long time.
Yep.
What is one of the freshest expressions of mission and ministry that you could share with us, or a cluster of them that you could share with us to start us off in a
I
conversation?
think there's a lot of them out there, but they fly under the radar.
Okay, wow.
Because we're mostly interested with numbers, size, show, and so we gravitate towards whatever is really visible, whatever is very big, whatever is very shiny. And a lot of these alternative expressions of church are very small. They're scattered all over the place, as we've been talking about, like scattered seeds everywhere. They are birthed, they die. Sometimes they last a year, sometimes they last 10 years, they move on. And so it's really difficult when we try and put usual metrics on something like that. And in Churchland, we know what the metrics are. We know that it's bums on seats, tithing, money, baptisms, conversions perhaps, all that kind of language. And so when it comes to fresh expressions or alternative ways of doing church, we have to think about what are we doing, first of all, a really basic question, what do we want? And then how do we measure that and not use the usual metrics because they don't work with something like this. So I know of a lot of amazing things happening. And they are flying under the radar. One that I can share with you because it's quite public, because some of these they don't want to be in the public sphere. They don't want to be noticed. This is a UCA fresh expression, and that is Jason Johns, who is a forest chaplain in Bellingen. And so Jason has a little faith community there. and he is connecting in with people who are really struggling because what is happening with the climate, what's happening with the trees in Bellingen, the logging that is going on there. So he stands up for the community there. And he also runs a little faith community that's outdoors, that's very eco-friendly, that's connected with very much to do with terms like biomimicry. And so, that's very contextual because people in Bellingen are very connected to nature. They do care about what's going on with the trees, and they are asking the big questions like, is there something beyond us? Is it the universe? Is it God? Is it nature? What's going on? What will happen to our future? And so Fresh Expressions for me, and you're right, Ness, it's been around for such a long time. Yeah. I don't even know who started the term. I know it's been around in the UK for a very long time, and I know that it has a particular process, and that is you connect with a particular community, you listen well to that community, and then you love the community, you serve the community, and then you begin to engage in connecting the community with anything to do with spirituality, whether it's God, whether it's Jesus, you begin that, and then you can start a faith community from there. So in that sense, it's very indigenous in the sense that it comes from the ground up. Another planting term. It's not imposed on the place. It comes from the ground up. And place matters, so the way you are doing the work of God here is very different to the way Jason is doing it, different to the way I'm doing it in Surry Hills. Yeah. And so again, it's about that listening and connecting in. And so there's a lot of these things going on, and they're very, as we've just said, it's hard to measure. And so sometimes I wonder whether, we talk about Christianity being in decline, and I wonder if we're measuring the wrong thing. We're measuring how much people are turning up to church. Maybe that's in decline. But maybe people are still looking for spirituality, faith, God, Jesus even, and they're connecting in all these little pockets of community everywhere. Yep. But we're not really paying attention to that. And maybe we don't want to. Maybe it doesn't really matter.
I think the number of seekers is still the same. People seeking a connection with the spirit world, whatever that looks like, whatever language they put with it. Because how many times as a God person does somebody say to you, once they know that you're a reverend or a pastor, they say, I'm not very religious.
Yep.
Yeah? My response to that is, neither am I. I'm so not into religion. I just love God. That's my response. And I think people are scared of the institution of church, and for pretty good reason. Yeah. We kind of stuffed it.
In a lot of cases,
Yeah. And people are, hurt by things that so-called godly people have said and done. Yep. And they feel sad by that. Yep. I understand that. Yep. So I wonder how it is that we engage. Maybe we need to go back to the way that Jesus was doing it in home churches and smaller groups and meeting the needs of the community in those community areas, and not worrying about bums on seats, but just worrying about sacred conversations and beautiful relationships and caring and attending to one another.
About a month ago, we just had Mike Frost on the show as well to talk about his newest book, Mission is the Shape of Water. And he talks about this idea basically that fits in with this conversation where it's not about sitting around going like, how do we make church fresh and exciting again? It's actually about, if mission is the shape of water, we're going with that analogy, it molds and fills whatever container it is that you pour it into. And so the way that you engage in your faith communities, the way that you construct your faith communities, and the way that you service your faith communities has to be specific to that community. Otherwise, it's just a cookie cutter thing that maybe works for some people, but it's certainly not going to serve specific to that community. And so he was talking about actually just like, instead of having these high level strategic conversations about how to reinvigorate the church if it's failing and all these kind of, I think, just ridiculous, unattainable top level conversations that aren't practical at all, talk to the people around you. Like, talk to the people that you see in your community, inside or outside of church, and actually start having conversations about where are you at? What do you need? What are you after? Where are your spiritual hungers? And start there. And if it's a genuine connection and something that comes from a genuine desire to be in community together, it doesn't matter whether or not it grows, because it's doing what it needs to do already. Like that's doing the thing.
It is.
Yeah. So I really need to go back and re-listen to that, because I didn't really listen to it other than doing the episode. Go back and spend a bit more time in that book maybe even as well.
It's about being human, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, sometimes I wonder that as Christians we can be very programmatic, very strategic, very targeted. You know, like you hear words like mission field and strategic church planting. I mean, again, you know, we sometimes those things are necessary, but it can turn us into machines. We're human, and humans long for connection, and sometimes I just feel like we need to relax and just make that connection. Touching on that though, I mean, missiologists have been talking about that for a very long time. I'm going to use this word, missionary. A good missionary goes into a context and just listens and connects and doesn't impose. I said that I'm going to use that word because I know it's a word that's really out of favour. Missionary and mission are problematic words, and we need to talk about that. Whenever we use the word mission, missionary as Christians, we need to recognise the damage that has been done, the way that we have colonised, the way that we have destroyed, the way that we have hurt people, and always qualify when we use those words. I mean, there's a lot of discussion these days that we shouldn't be using that word, and I'm sort of ambivalent about it. I haven't found another word, but I do think we need to qualify it every time we use it, because there's been a lot of bad missionary behaviour. I think there's a whole genre of films of bad missionaries. The latest one I watched was called Godland,
and
it was
saw
about
that one too.
A Danish missionary to Iceland, and it was awful. I mean, beautiful, incredible film.
Great, but the mission.
Yes. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
I've asked my students at the theological college to watch it. We're going to debrief it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
We might do a
pod on that.
Yeah, we might do it.
yeah.
It's a great idea. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. I've got a copy. I can lend it to you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I hadn't actually thought about that movie since I saw it when it came out. I had such good conversations with some friends about that. I went with a couple of mates from church, and we just sat in the car for like half an hour on the drive home, just like, we need to talk about this. So yeah, we'll definitely come back to that.
Great.
That's a great shout. Yeah.
What about those incidental God instances that just happen and you are left wondering why, and then you just organically start a relationship with people or a group of people? So I'll talk an example. I have not long ago just done the funeral of a very young woman, and she just tragically just died, 37, and she was a friend of mine and a part of the community, and she'd been a friend of mine. I had met her originally in my corporate world before I was a minister. But she watched me. She was becoming a lawyer when I was doing Reverend school. And we shared so much together just while we were both at uni and doing our thing together. And she wasn't into God, but it didn't matter because we just liked each other so much. Anyway, I become a minister, she becomes a lawyer, and we just stayed friends, and then she died. And interestingly, from that, because the death was a young person and so tragic, it's actually brought a group of us together because of that death. Women that I was really friendly with in my corporate role, for many, many years I knew these ladies, and we'd have deep, just female conversations and just connection. I wasn't doing the minister thing, I was being the exercise specialist person, but I always used to say I had that thing on my forehead that said, tell me all your life stuff. So I must have been just innately pastoral anyway in how I was being. And we've just reconnected through her death, and her parents have connected in with our community, our faith community. And it's just quite beautiful and organic how God is using that situation to do healing, wholeness and transformation and soothing grief and just in the midst of rawness. And I think, wow, I never even did anything to make that happen. There wasn't anything anybody did. It just organically happened. And from that, it's turning to be a beautiful thing. And that's, I think, it's a little bit going back to staring at the bits of green. It's being attentive, isn't it? It's stopping.
Yeah.
It's listening to what's going on around you, and then it's responding.
Yeah.
Praying and then responding to what God's people need.
I often feel like, on the point around, being machines and being strategic and being intentional, that sometimes the opposite of that is something that we look past. So the opposite of that I call incidentality.
Yeah, I love that.
Rather than intentionality. So we need intentionality, but at the same time, incidentality is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Things just happen, incidental things, and you only look at it from behind, and then you go, was God in that? Was the universe in that? Was the sacred in that? There was something going on, and look at what has emerged.
Yep.
And we talk a lot about that in the Neighbourhood. So
Beautiful.
we are very place-based. We're community facilitators in Surry Hills. We work a lot with a neighbourhood centre, and we experience incidentality all the time. We walk out of our door to get from one place to the next, and we bump into people along the way all the time, have encounters, have chats. We learn about their struggles, we learn about their joys, and from that things grow and happen and get messy and chaotic and beautiful, and it's all incidental.
But that's being community, isn't it? That's living and being in community, and I think, and God's in the middle of that, and God's in all those conversations, and I think that's church, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's our modern church, which is actually not very modern, because I think this is what Jesus was doing a couple of thousand years ago.
Yeah.
I think it looked something like what you just described, Karina.
Yeah. I mean, the whole idea of the parish is coming back in, isn't it? We have people in the US that have written about that quite some time ago now, the parish collective. It's a very old term where the minister not only is supposed to care for the church, but for the whole neighbourhood, the whole parish. And so the church becomes one part of the ecology of the neighbourhood. And so, it's sort of coming back in now in some ways. And I mean, I have to be careful because I see it as my parish and I see God at work, but some of the people in that community don't see it that way. They don't see God at work there because they wouldn't use that language.
Okay.
So I'm not imposing that on them, but that is the way that I see it. I see the Spirit at work in that context as much as I see the Spirit at work in church.
Yeah.
And I think once we start asking, God, what are you doing in my neighbourhood? Not so much, God, what are you doing in my church? But what are you doing in my neighbourhood? Things begin to shift. Things change things get radical then because you're focusing on outside the church.
Yeah, that's where it... that's the stuff that excites me, because that's the stuff that doesn't just affect you on a Sunday morning and is this little parceled thing that we interact with, and we kind of have an understanding of that because it's in a box that we can define. It's when it actually starts to leak out and affect like the way we live our lives and the way we interact with each other and the way that we, when we do the Lord's Prayer every week, we talk about your kingdom come. Like that is what that looks like for me, is the way that we go to church on a Sunday and we gather as a community, but it's like, okay, so now what? What are you actually going to do as a result? If the gospel is something that is as radically life-changing as we like to say that it is, so then what? And the lived experiences of our neighbourhoods and communities that aren't necessarily inside those church walls, like that for me is where you talk about fresh expressions of faith. Like that's where that not only has potential to happen, but that's where that is happening. That's where the conversations that I have that leave me the most invigorated, the most like challenged, they don't happen in church a lot of the time. They happen in the neighbourhood, in the communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And, sometimes it's incredible to think about how separate the church and world have become. We sometimes exist in our own little echo chamber. I mean, fair enough, we live in a culture that has echo chambers. People tend to gravitate towards people that look like them and are like them. So the church is just that as well. We tend to gravitate towards people like us and talk church language and all of that, and being outside of that, and as you're saying, Jonty, just connecting with people and having conversations, sometimes I begin to reflect on the fact that we in the church are answering questions that people aren't even asking. That's how disconnected we've become.
Far out.
We're talking amongst ourselves, and we take a peek outside and we think, hang on a second, they're not even asking those questions. We're giving them answers, and it's not, there's such a disconnect. And I mean, for me, that's the biggest issue that we need to be talking about and thinking about today when it comes to spirituality, the disconnect that's happened between church and world. And I know that that's a binary, and I always get picked up on it, that there's always a bit of the world in the church and a bit of church in the world. I get it. But I just feel like there's such a disconnect between the two, and we talk about church growth and numbers and making the church better, but we need to understand our culture a lot better to be able to connect and to be able to help people use language like the sacred, or maybe that's not the word they want to use. Maybe they want to use another word, and that's okay too. But articulating, what it is that we experience when we sense beauty or transcendence, what's going on there. Just, walking alongside people. Like for me, that's where I get my joy, and that's what I love doing, and that's what excites me, that kind of thing.
Well, they're very blessed to have you down in Surry Hills, sister.
Oh, thank you.
We need to put all Karina's
we'll put
stuff in the show
details
notes
down below,
Yeah,
for
definitely.
sure.
And certainly about the cafe, the Climate Cafe.
Yeah.
If
We'll be
you've got a
running
date,
one
that'd be
towards the
great.
end of the year. And I'm talking with one of the facilitators around that. So the Surry Hills Neighbourhood Centre has a cafe every Friday morning. Everyone's welcome. You get free scones,
Wow.
Devonshire tea. So I'm always there chatting with people. And we also have a faith community in our home once a month. It's very transient. People come, they sit, they listen, they go. We're very open to people who identify as not Christian, people from the queer community, people from different religions. All are welcome there. We just sit and we talk about life
Sounds
and
beautiful.
making meaning.
That's great.
Sounds really powerful.
Maybe there's so many more things we could talk about, but that we've reached probably a good time to
We
wrap
just
this
have her
episode up.
back.
We'll do this again
that'd be
sometime.
lovely.
I guess
Come back.
last question, which we often ask when we have guests on the show, what are you grateful for today?
Today, I'm grateful for my health.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm grateful for my health.
Yeah, I think we can all resonate with that. Certainly both of us have had.
Yeah.
And
Semi-recent
Ness, I
health,
love
yeah.
the way you talked about your heart health, because that's physical and spiritual, isn't it?
Isn't it?
So I'm grateful for my heart health.
Yeah. I just want to
That's
share
great.
something with you. Before I came here today, I've been really anxious. I've been having heart palpitations myself, and I'm assuming it's not biomechanical. I'm assuming it's driven by anxious thinking in my brain. And I don't want to take any more medication than I already am, because I don't want to get dopey and dribbly in the chair.
Yeah.
And I want to kind of just manage on the amount that I am, but I'm getting physiological response, which is very bloody disturbing. I don't like how it feels. And yet, I was quite anxious. I get nervous about doing this. I really do, every single time.
Yeah.
I care so much. I just feel like I just still get very anxious. I get anxious about every bloody thing that I do, Karina. And I came in, and after I accosted you at the door and asked you 40 million questions, and I felt that I got your sense of calm just ooze into my own bloodstream, my own sense of heart rate started to settle, and it's like my body just started copying your calm. It was really beautiful.
Oh, that's beautiful,
So
Ness.
thank you, because that's a gift today you've given me a huge gift.
Oh, thank you.
In that.
We affect one another,
Don't
right?
we? Yes.
That's another part of the nature cycle.
Yeah.
We affect one another.
Yeah, you've affected me.
You know, we can consciously do that though. Walk into a room and kind of go, I'm not going to start up here.
Yeah.
I'm just going to calm down before I walk in and move into that space. That's something I learned. Ness.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So where do I book in for that class? Is it at uni? Do I go there? Do I get an injection? A pill at help?
Not at UTC. It's
Yeah.
Plenty of that. That's right. Yeah, it's really great, Karina. It's really beautiful, and I think we can all learn from that in this fast-paced life that we live in, and wanting to. I have an anxiousness to smash out as much ministry as I possibly can before I die. That's where I'm at, because I wished God had called me much younger, and I wasn't. I was called way into my middle life, and I've got this anxiety around, I'm not going to get it all done, Lord.
Yeah.
You know, and so that anxiety drives my pace, and I think I need to calm down, do a bit of that Karina thing. I need to be more like her. I want to be like her.
You talked a couple of weeks ago about you had like a gear analogy.
Yeah.
Just downshiftting.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I so often rock in fourth.
Yeah.
I need to operate in one.
Yeah.
Or two.
Start
maybe.
in one and work your way out.
Yeah, I know. That's right. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah.
You're a pleasure, sister.
Thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you, Jonty. Yeah, lovely.
Where can people find you online if they want to interact, or are you socials on lockdown?
No,
person?
I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and we have a website called Neighbourhood Matters. That's our little organisation of community facilitators.
Awesome. Yeah. So if people want to follow anything up that we've chatted about, there's a good place to do that. Also, if you want to follow up anything with us, and we can also pass anything on to Karina, and we can talk about these again. filthyhopepod@gmail.com, or as always, you can join us in the Facebook group and continue a conversation there. We're on socials as well, so find us there. I think that just about does it.
I reckon we should lock her down for the panel.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Good.
She'd be a kick-ass panel chick.
Good call.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll have another conversation.
Yeah. Don't you think?
You've just behind the curtain. We're at Filthy Hope planning.
Right. Doing a bit of strategy.
Right. Nice.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll see you guys next week.
This is a prayer for the people who want to give up, who have been hurt beyond repair and cannot bear to see your face in anything. Find peace in letting go of the guilt that is in yours, and find hope in understanding. Life is not a game you have to win. Forgiveness overwhelming, salvation not deserved.